So, welcome everybody to Embracing Diversity Week. By now, you should have attended some great sessions provided by Anderson this week. For those who don't know, Embracing Diversity Week is Anderson's annual flagship celebration of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Each year, clubs, centers, and programs invite speakers to discuss EDI issues that impact their careers and industries, and it leads to some pretty dope conversations. And so today's session is powered by the Entertainment Management Association and the Black Business Student Association, and it's called Changing the Narrative for Women in Entertainment Through Authorship and Storytelling. And so for those who don't know, my name is Ashley Johnson. I am a second-year full-time MBA student here at Anderson. I am also the co-president of the Black Business Student Association and the co-VP of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Entertainment Management Association. And so one of the reasons why I came to Anderson was I wanted to address the disparities and the lack of representation within the entertainment industry and create more opportunities for women, specifically women of color. So it's with great honor to be joined by Liz Jenkins here today. Liz Jenkins is the COO of Hello Sunshine, a media brand and content company dedicated to female authorship and storytelling across all platforms. During her time at Hello Sunshine, she has been responsible for establishing and overseeing finance, business affairs, physical production operations, as well as facilitating the growth of the company's business, including their scripted, unscripted, and kids and animation studios and Reese's Book Club, all of which put women or girls at the center of each narrative. Previously, Liz served as the head of strategic ventures at Sony PlayStation and SVP of corporate development and strategy at MRC, where she developed innovative distribution models, strategic partnerships, and new businesses across film and television. Liz serves on the board of Snap Inc. She is also a board member and treasurer of GLAAD. Liz received her MBA from the Wharton School and her BA from Stanford University. So I can speak for all of us to say we are so happy to be joined by Liz Jenkins here today. And so Liz, I just want to kick things off. I gave a very, very brief introduction about your career, but I know a lot of us are wondering what exactly a COO does, or what is a typical day like for a COO? So maybe you could start and go a little bit more detailed about your career.
Sure, of course. I laugh at that question because there's almost like a typical day. Part of being a COO is like every day is a little bit different, and I laugh. I'm like, what doesn't a COO do? It's honestly, for someone like me who enjoys a lot of different challenges and a wide variety of things, it's a great role in that regard. And it's a role too that honestly, like a CFO, can be very different, like the scope in which it encompasses, depending on the business, the size of the company, the stage of the company, and frankly, some of the other structures of it. So, look, I think at the highest level, what my goal or my primary responsibility is as a leader of the company, I talk about, it's like creating conditions. It's creating conditions for the people in the organization, both my teams specifically, as well as the broader team, to be really successful and to achieve the goals that are set. So what does that look like? I think a day can be, some days it's just literally just one-on-ones with a lot of different my direct reports. So people who are leading business affairs, who are leading finance, who are leading, HR, and talking about, progress, areas that I can help like unblock certain things, to the extent, especially a company like ours, that's growing really rapidly, where we're all wearing a lot of different hats until we've got someone in this seat who's leading this. A lot of times I get stepping in and sort of having a side job that's something completely different than whatever else is the role. So it's really doing what needs to be done, and both focused on how do we like execute on the plan that we have in front of us, as well as looking ahead a period of time and saying, okay, well, like what's really going to drive the long-term growth of the business? You get to see the whole thing, how all the pieces connect, and making sure that each of the people who are really focused in their specific lane are aware of how their role and what they're doing impacts other folks. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of ways to be organized and energized, which leads to my next question. You have a lot to manage. You have a team, you have your personal life. How do you stay organized and energized in a role like a COO? What are some tools that you use or some skill sets that you leverage?
I think I'll start with the energized piece. How do you stay energized? Look, I think what's really important for everyone, especially, here, who's your role and leaving school and what's next and all that, I think understanding both like you as an individual, what energizes you, what motivates you. And I know what it is for me, right? Like I am very energized by one thing is I'm energized by making an impact, feeling like I've made a difference in something. I jokingly call it, consistent existential reinforcement. Like there's a reason that I'm here in this place. That gives me a lot of energy, knowing that, gosh, if I hadn't been here or done this, I don't know if this would have gotten done, so that's a piece for me. But it's like with any role, your role isn't going to be 100% things that like give you energy, but figuring out like what's the right balance and how do I incorporate that into my day-to-day. In terms of, how I stay organized, it's different things. I find that there are different systems that have worked for me. One system that I like a lot, it's called Getting Things Done, GTD, as a model. And it talks about like a lot of the energy that we expend in our mind is just remembering stuff like, oh, I got to remember to do this. And our brain isn't set up to say like, okay, I need to get batteries, that you'll remember that while you're at the store and able to buy batteries. Usually, you remember it when you're standing here and you're like, oh, this thing doesn't work. I need batteries. So like, it's a whole system for capturing all of the things that are like in your mind and need to be done and how you track and organize those. So.
Yeah, very, very important. It's something that you touched on. You talked about finding things that keep you energized. And I know that's something that a lot of us struggle. We're coming into an MBA program and we're trying to figure out what our passion or what our purpose is to figure out what's going to keep us energized. How did you go about finding that throughout your career? Or, obviously you found it now, but is it just through, getting out there, getting your hands wet or getting your hands dirty and kind of understanding what fuels you?
It's a great question. I think, I pretty early on, I would say I can really put my finger on it. Like by the time I was really 24, 25, it was one of the reasons I left to go to business school. I decided, look, I want to do something that interests me personally too, right? So, and one of the things, the light bulb moment, no pun intended, was I went to GE right after college. And I went very intentionally because at that point in time, GE was sort of known as one of the world's most admired companies. And it was really well run. And for a company as big, global, diverse, et cetera, as it was in every business you can imagine, like the very definition of a conglomerate. It was really lean and operated really effectively. And so I went to kind of go learn how great businesses run. And even though I always thought media was interesting, I didn't start there. I started at GE Medical Systems. And it was literally one November, I was in Budapest, outside of Budapest, to be clear, an hour and a half outside of Budapest in freezing cold weather, working on an audit related to inventory for gas turbines, which frankly, maybe there's some gas turbine lovers out there. I don't care, and so it just was one of those things where it didn't energize me. I'm like, it's not something. And I found that when I pick up Fortune magazine to read or the Wall Street Journal to read, and I go to the index to figure out what article I wanted to read, I always went and looked at media companies. And I was like, this is what I'm drawn to. I want to do something where, say no to be excellent. It's not like a 9-to-5 job. It's like the curiosity. It's 9 to 5. It'll take you a long time to hit your 10,000 hours. So I wanted to do something that I really was personally fascinated by. And so I joked that when I went to business school, I was like, it's probably going to be media and entertainment because I like movies and TV shows, or retail because I like shopping. And that was it, And so I knew that for me, being in a space like that I had some sort of personal connection to and interest in would be enough of a motivation to do and passion to do the work that I think that was required to really build a strong and build and maintain arguably a strong foundation in the space.
Yes, and you kind of touched on something a little bit. So I know that you started your career in finance and investment banking, and you recognize that, maybe I'm more passionate about media and entertainment. And a lot of students feel that way when they come to business school. They want to do a pivot, and in some cases, a double pivot. Yeah. So what was your transition like, transitioning to entertainment, and what advice would you give those who are looking to pivot into entertainment?
I think a couple things. So first, my transition was very sort of pragmatic about it, and it was kind of by degrees. And it is advice I actually give people today about oh, this looks really cool, I want to do this. I'm like, well, oftentimes for me, it was figuring out like, what is it that I'm good at and how do I take that so that I know day one, I can make an impact. And so moving out from there by degrees, expanding and building on a base where there's a reason for you to be at a table, in a discussion, in a conversation, because you're going to add value. But being at that table, you're hearing things, you're learning things that enable you to sort of grow that foundational skill set is, I think, a really big piece of making a pivot, right? Is starting from like what you know and building from there. So for me, my background was in finance, and coming out of school, I wanted to go, I said, I still think there's more I want to learn about the space. I didn't know what entertainment company I wanted to go work for. So I was like, why not go work in professional services where I can serve all of these folks as clients? I can learn about the industry generally, the businesses more specifically, and that should make it easier to transition into one of those roles. So I did like investment banking, but I did it in the media telecom group of an investment bank. And so I worked, and 90% of my clients were media clients. So strong finance background that I had, able to take that, build upon my skill set there, and add skills that are directly relevant to the things that I do today, as well as understanding media. The only other piece I'd add about kind of advice for making the pivot, it's also be honest with yourself about what it is that you want to do. The most common question I get from folks is like, well, so I have a business background, but what's the role that combines business and creative? And it can be hard because there are roles that can combine them, but it's like, if you really want to be a producer, you got to go and do the path that it takes to become a producer. So be honest with yourself about how much of a pivot you want to make. Because if you have a business background and you want to be in the media business, then what I talked about is a great way to do it. Get in there and sort of expand and grow by degrees into that. If you're like, it's really night and day, acknowledge that it's like, okay, this means to be a producer, I'm probably going to need to go be an assistant, even if it means a step back, because I've got to do the apprenticeship. I've got to do the work to really build like that skill set.
Yeah, and I think it's very important about having that self-awareness about what you desire and what you want and being intentional about that. And so I'm curious to see, how have you advocated for yourself and been intentional with your career step to ensure your career progression throughout your career? Someone asked a question a lot, who is a great mentor for you? Well, the mentors that I name typically are all people I worked for. And they never called themselves my mentor, but mentoring is a two-way street. It requires action by the mentee, And so what does that look like? It means figuring out what are the things that I can observe? What are the things that I can directly glean from them? What do I need to know? And really setting yourself up in a position and working for people who sort of support your development. And so I think that, obviously we got to be as entrepreneurial about your own career, like you as an individual, as you are about building a business and thinking about a business plan and identifying the white space and strategic direction. You got to do the same thing with yourself. So there have been times in my career where I've noticed and observed certain things. So the example, there were times I said, well, wait, I need to actually work on raising my public profile to get to the next step. People who I work with kind of know who I am and know that I'm good at this thing, but I need to be sitting on more panels. I need to be doing X, Y, or Z, because that'll enable me to build the right sort of network and credibility sometimes when entering into certain conversations, et cetera. And frankly, too, as I think about a step later in my career, having that will be beneficial to me as an individual. So knowing that, and this was probably, now 10 years ago, that I was like, I need to do that. I said, all right, well, let me go and ask for it. If I go and ask and say, hey, for my career, the next job I get, would help if people knew who I am. My current bosses aren't going to say that. You're not going to say, yes, let's go and do it. So it's really, well, how does it support what the business needs are? So it's figuring out, I always talk about the intersection. There are three circles they think about. It's what are sort of your personal interests, right? Or the things that you're passionate about, or the things that you want. What are your capabilities and what are the business needs? And you're not going to be able to, if you're constantly advocating for stuff that's only in your interest circle, it's hard as a business leader to be well, how does that help what we're trying to do here? I want it to be all three. So I think it's both
really thinking about how the intersection points of like your interests and business needs, or your interests, your capabilities and business needs, and then just positioning things that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that, we know that there's value in, getting your MBA. And so I'm curious to know, what are some experiences you recommend students to take advantage of during their time in business school? Or you can discuss some ways in which business school prepared you for your career or your journey.
I think that, I guess a couple of things. I think one is study a broad range of things. The more you advance in your career, the more specific and narrow you become to some degree, right? You become more specialized. And so I think there's something about, it's the same way I think a liberal arts education can be really valuable, because it forces your brain to stretch and expand like in different ways. And I believe there's a lot to be gained by having, in business generally, I talk about pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is important because you're always going to be doing stuff that's new. And if you're starting from zero on like, oh, how do I do that? I've never done that before. If you can't recognize the patterns, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So I think putting yourself in new, uncomfortable, different situations. Hey, maybe you want to do more of a finance path, or you want to do more of a marketing path. Doesn't matter. Take some coursework that's in other stuff. So one, to stretch and expand your brain, and two, to get used to really operating as a multi-discipline executive, because it is, the more you can do that, the more successful you'll be in your role. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is get to know people. Like, it is, your network becomes what's the thing I tap into most frequently from my time at business school? I will tell you, it's not that I'm dusting off textbooks. It's that I'm picking up the phone and calling people that I went to class, I was in class with, or thinking about stories that I told. Every single job that I've gotten since my first job leaving business school, every single job since then has been somehow through, not necessarily my business school network. Some of it has been, but it's just been my network generally. So I think that's the big thing. And you'll find other, it again is another way of expanding your sort of your mind and your knowledge base, different roles, opportunities, and things like that you may never have come across based on the path that took you to where you are now.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think so many students come to business school with their idea of what they want to do, and then you get out and you explore and you find out so many other opportunities or different avenues that you can, go in your career. I know for a fact that's how my experience has been at Anderson. I came in with entertainment, pivoted, did a consulting internship, and I'm like, how did I get here? But that's the beauty of business school. You explore and you learn a lot about yourself in the process.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk a little bit more about, female representation in middle management. And so obviously it remains lacking. And so what obstacles or challenges did you have to overcome to obtain a seat in the senior leadership role? Are there any stories or, anecdotes that you can share that may have contributed to your journey?
Look, I think it's being different is challenging, in a lot of ways, I think, but there's a lot of opportunity. And I warn you, I tend to be, a world-class reframer, where it's like, how do you find, there's one thing to say, it's hard. It is hard being different and being the only one. And I've been the only one in a lot of ways, or the only person who looks like me at a table in a lot of ways. It's been hard, but there have also been some really great aspects of it, right? I've had to whether or not it is it's positive because people will remember you, you're a bit different, or two, not being afraid to speak up and knowing that I'm going to have a different perspective than other folks in it, and how that's communicated is it communicated in a way, is it an environment where that may be embraced? And even if it's not, I'm going to say it anyway, and because smart people will recognize that perspective is one that would have been lacking otherwise. So I think it's important to lean into it and not shy away from it. Are there skills that you build I believe, I took one of the things that helped me most in my career was the fact I grew up moving around a lot. I went to 3 different high schools, for example. If I count middle school, junior high, I went to, 6 different schools, 7 different schools between kindergarten and graduating from high school. That helped me become really adaptable. right? Like, and figuring out how to adapt to like understanding the culture of a place and the structures of a place and all of that. And that's a lot of what business is, you know what I mean? So I think that there are some benefits of like, there's resilience that you can build from, you know, being in those types of circumstances. It is not to say that there isn't a detrimental or negative impact that you can have from being in a culture that isn't welcoming, that isn't, you know, all of that. And so I think that it's really important to have support. You know, what is your sort of like support structure that you have in place, you know, either within the organization or outside of the organization? And, you know, having like a degree of like self-awareness about like how you're personally impacted and how do you manage all of that. But look, I think, I do think things are changing, which is wonderful. Things are improving. There's always more that needs to be done. Structural change takes a lot of time. But, you know, I am encouraged by whether there are mandates that states, companies are putting in place around diversity at the board level of companies. It's massive steps in the right direction. And we're having conversations that I don't think we ever had before. And we just have to keep having those conversations because real and lasting change is going to take a lot of time. But I'm seeing it happen now. And the more it happens, I think the more the business case, it continues to get proven that diverse executive teams, diverse boards, and diverse companies perform better, hands down, than companies that aren't. So, you know, at the end of the day, the most cynical person can't run from that, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on some great points. It seems like it's very important to not only find your voice, but also own it and not be afraid to share it, and also being very adaptable. And what's kind of interesting, I also went to like 8 different schools in kindergarten to 12th grade. And so that's preparing me for being very adaptable to new experiences and new environments. And so I'm curious to know about, you know, any mistakes that you made early in your career and, you know, how you've learned from them, how they've shaped you now as a professional.
Any mistakes? I mean, I'm like, which one? We all make mistakes. I think, you know, I would pick like a sort of a macro level one, philosophical one, something I could change looking back on it. I think I've very much, in some ways it served me. I've always very much focused on like, okay, like this is the path, like what's ahead, and really sort of like sprinting, like running a marathon at a sprint pace, which is, I think can be hard to sustain. And so I do think that like having grace for oneself is very important. And I think it's actually very common, folks of my generation. I laugh, I was on a panel a few months ago with other sort of like senior level women, and to hear the stories that we all told that were literally about like burnout, working X times as hard as every other person, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's tough, and it comes at a real cost. And so I think it's something I continue to work on today. It's like, how do I treat myself with the same level of grace and kindness that I treat others? Because it's a journey, and, you know, you're going to make missteps along the way. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to maybe pick the wrong job, but like everything is temporary, right? You know, or most things are. So I think just for me, it was taking the time to like, I wish I'd taken more time to enjoy some of the parts of the journey itself rather than being so focused on the destination, you know, that.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think that's something that a lot of us fail to realize in business school. We're so on the go and want to get things done that you have to take that time to take care of yourself and focus on your personal life. You know, you can't get to the highest without taking care of yourself.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yep.
Someone sent this article to me once. I don't think it was a HBS or HBR article, but it was something that was essentially comparing executives to like athletes, like professional athletes. Like, you think about professional athletes, they don't work year round. Like football has an off season. Every sport has an off season where they take time, they recover, they have training. It is like, and executives don't have that. And so it was really comparing the two and saying how important it is to take the time to like for rejuvenation and renewal, because effectively that's the level at which you're operating, right? So it's very important to keep in mind.
Yeah. And so we have a lot of people on the call who want to be the next leaders of entertainment. And so what advice do you give to this next generation interested in not only making a difference, but also showcasing diversity in entertainment?
I will go back to the point I was making before about your voice and like really standing for what you believe in. And, I think that if you don't speak up, if you don't like celebrate, lean into the differences that you have, then that's anathema to diversity, right? Because we can all look different and all have different backgrounds, but then become so focused on, the fitting in effectively that we really miss the opportunity to be who we are and have an impact in that way. So that's one thing I'd say is, don't shy away from that. Even when it's hard and even when it feels like there's a lot that's at stake. You look at, I think, a lot of the reckoning that's happened in this entertainment industry over the last, however many years has been due to people maybe been structurally silenced, but other people who just went along with it and didn't speak up. So I think whatever it is, and it doesn't have to even be anything like as serious and grave as that, but it's, and go to places where you can do that, I think is really important. At the same time, I think it's understanding, I'm a real believer in like, understanding not just how to speak, but to speak in a way that influences, right? And so everybody has a different style, but it's like, and it goes like the point about adaptability and the point you asked me about advocating for myself, like knowing audience and knowing what motivates certain people, being an observer of that and understanding how to tailor your communication to different folks in that voice comment. It's not just as simple as saying, this is what I think, but it's understanding what's the most effective way, most influential way to communicate.
Yes. And so let's get into a company that is doing a great job at showcasing those diverse voices, Hello Sunshine. And so Hello Sunshine is on a mission to change the narrative for women. So what excites you most about the impact that Hello Sunshine has had thus far? And what are you most looking forward to?
Gosh, so much. I think I feel so proud and like humbled and honored to be a part of what it is that we're doing, to be able to combine both like my love for movies and television series in this industry with making like really trying and endeavoring to make a real and lasting change in the world, in the lives of people who work at the company, for people in our industry, and even beyond that. So that's like, I love that. I feel blessed to be able to do it. One of the things I think, if you go back to what I was saying before about the business case, and that even the most cynical people, when faced with like the numbers in black and white or the facts in black and white, and I think that what we've been able to demonstrate is the business case for authentically authored content that puts women and women in all our various shapes and sizes and forms. We're focused on like the intersectionality of us all, that it works. And so that's the thing I'm most proud of, whether it's from the performance of our content, the quality of the content that we produce, how it performs on platforms, to, the recent sale of the company this year that surprised a lot of folks. And it's like, I'm very proud that we've been able to do it in a way that creates more space for others to do the same and shows like the why behind doing it this way. So
Yes, I love that. And speaking of, I know that recently Reese's Book Club launched a Lit Up
Yeah.
initiative, which is a fellowship for unpublished women writers from marginalized communities. Can you talk a little bit more about this initiative and how it came about within the organization?
It actually was the idea of two like junior folks that were on the team. One woman was a manager on my team doing sort of a strategic finance. And the other was a person who's a manager on the Reese's book club team. It was an idea that they came up with. So one, like, to me, that was amazing. It was amazing for them to like come up with the idea and actually be the ones to implement it. So that was the genesis of that exact idea. But broadly speaking, back to our mission, right? Like it is about our mission isn't just like, let's have a book club that picks really popular books. It is about like, how do we expand the seats at the table and knowing the power of people coming together, what a difference it makes. And so we have, as we thought about Reese's book club and people really wanting to be, they kept saying, we want to be a member. We're like, follow us on Instagram. It's like, well, we want more. And rather than just selling people stuff, we thought, and we started launching like an e-commerce business as well. But the proceeds go to support like what's called the readership, which is all about give back initiatives, whether it's literacy, whether it is like elevating like female authors that come from underserved, underrepresented communities who have been structurally like disadvantaged. How do we create more advantage there? To looking at the independent booksellers, like that is a big who we are and who our audience is, right? So, there'll be more things kind of under that banner that are to come.
Love it, love it. And obviously, we need more companies like Hello Sunshine in the industry. And so, can you think of any other companies that are also making an impact and addressing this that you are personally enthusiastic about?
Gosh, I mean, look, I think there's so many. There are a lot of different companies in a lot of different places that I really admire, what it is that they're doing. Like in our industry, I really admire, and I'm going to forget some people, I'm sure, but like Charles King and Macro and what it is that they're doing, right? Making really prestige film and television series with, people of color at the center of those that are like, very authentically like authored as well. So, that's a company that I really like and an individual that I really admire. I think that there are a lot of companies as well, a lot of individuals like in our space, whether it's Ava DuVernay and what she's doing, both, like looking at array and expanding, like how do we provide more like access and awareness, because it's pipeline isn't the issue usually. Pipeline sometimes can be the issue. It's one. Sometimes it's just knowing who's out there. So how do we break down those barriers and create like sort of clear like flow of information to the type of content that she is creating. So it's just to name a couple.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely think the talent and the content is out there. It's just people need to be aware of it. They need to know about it.
Yep.
And so what do you want to see happen in the entertainment industry to address the many challenges women and people of color face in content, authorship, and also leadership?
I mean, look, what I want to see happen, it's in the entertainment industry and more broadly. Look, as I said, I mean, we're having a lot of really great conversations, important conversations now. They've never been had before. But I want those conversations to be happening next year, in 5 years, and in 10 years, because we will have made progress, but it's not going to be fixed. This is a problem that's centuries old and is, older than our business. And so I think that we can't expect change is fragile. It always is. Right? Because things can go back the other way. There are things that we're talking about. I'm not going to get political. There are things that we're talking about today that are shocking that we're talking about them again, and so it's continued. Things like this require vigilance from all of us. So what my hope is is that we continue to talk about and to look at, take a long look at ourselves in the mirror and say, where aren't we doing well? Where don't we have like the right sort of representation, the right sort of openness to, because again, one of the things I say is like perfect representation is kind of impossible if you think about, when you think of the intersectionality of each of us, to have perfect representation at every single level at a company that's X number of people becomes really hard. But what can you do? You can create an inclusive environment where like people feel they're like comfortable speaking up and sharing, and those voices are heard. That is the most like, that's it. That's sort of like, that's where it all starts. So.
Love it. And so we know that the pandemic fueled more diversity in the film industry in 2020. And so what do you think drove this change, and do you think this progress will continue?
I mean, I do think that one of the things that's happened with the explosion of like streaming these services is that, you know, there's both a breadth and a depth of content that we haven't seen before, right? And I think that has created a lot of opportunity. And I think a lot of awareness in a different way about like the power of certain audiences, right? Because I think we've all heard certain things about, like, I sat at plenty of tables where it's like, we just market this movie. We were talking about marketing a movie theatrically years ago. Well, we market it to the guys because the women are just going to come with their boyfriends. The guys are the ones who are making the decision. So that's all. We don't need to worry about like how it's tracking with women. Like, are you kidding? You know, like you are, that's how you see this audience with a ton of purchasing power. So I think that there are things that we could ignore or we didn't necessarily have visibility around in a world where we're looking at kind of ticket sales and some surveys and Nielsen, which was kind of flawed, and even viewership, but in a streaming world where they know sort of down to the person and the win and the amount of data that exists. I think that has actually caused some real changes. You can't ignore data in some ways where there were simple platitudes like, you know, urban movies don't travel. It's not true, right? People in the US don't want stuff that's subtitled or dubbed. That's not true, you know? So I think that that's a big piece of it. To me, even more than like kind of necessarily, I would say directly linked to the pandemic. We've seen a lot of that change sort of happening, you know, prior to it. And I think obviously the increase in content consumption during the pandemic is, you know, also sort of helps like feed a lot of that as well.
Yeah, and I just want to shift gears just a little bit because I know that you also worked in the gaming industry, and we do have a lot of students, a lot of women specifically, who are interested in working in gaming, which only 14% of the senior leadership in the gaming industry are women. So based on your experiences at PlayStation, do you foresee a greater shift in female representation, or what were some major differences in diversity and representation compared to the broader entertainment industry?
Sure. I mean, look, I'll caveat a little bit and say that I was at PlayStation, I was very focused on like video entertainment versus like the gaming piece of it. So I wouldn't have, you know, as much of so looking from that vantage point versus having worked like at a publisher, like at that level. I think the interesting thing about it is when you look at the statistics of women in gaming, women are gamers, right? They really are. And when you look at casual gaming, it is primarily female. And so I think, again, the answer kind of is the same. I think where if you want to most effectively serve your audience, you can't have the people who are making the decisions about content, not look anything like your audience, because you're going to lose. And I do, and so I think that there are some changes that, you know, we're seeing come about in that space. And I wouldn't, again, to some degree, I'm always like, well, look, if you're looking at a space that's the business case is there. There should be more diversity. Dive in, run that way, because you have the opportunity to make even more of an impact. I'm like, that's why I always say, don't shy away from places, like make sure you have a good support system, but don't shy away from places where you might be the only one, because I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Awesome. And so now we're going to enter into our Q&A portion.
Yeah.
And so students have input questions into our Slido. And if you have any questions, please put it in Slido. And so we're going to be reading questions from the audience. And so our first question is from Annie. And Annie, I'm not sure if you wanted to ask the question yourself or if you want me to do it. It's fine either way. Just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak if you wanted to.
No worries, Ashley. Go for it.
Okay. So your question is, how do you show up as your authentic self in all of your identities, as a woman, as a Black woman, at work?
I think that I think it also requires a lot of intentionality, because I think that there have even been moments where I've had to remind myself, because I think that it's been, especially being different and being in a space a lot of times where I was the only one of this or that, it used to sort of the masks that we wear, and we all wear masks of some form, right? I think COVID has kind of shifted some of that, because what's private becomes public unless you have a background. You can see behind me, like, okay, the shelf behind me at home, I have not cleaned that off, much to the chagrin of my wife. There are like books everywhere, but hey, I had a handy background, so it looks like everything around me is perfectly clean. Well, some of that, was lost during this period of time, but I think it requires a lot of intention to break those old habits, to show up as who we are. I'm very fortunate that I work at a company where I feel comfortable and safe doing that. I remember I've told the story a couple of times, the weekend after George Floyd was murdered, and going back to work on that Monday, and the weekend had been really hard for me. I was like, I could barely, honestly, barely get out of bed. I was just brokenhearted, and this is the world that we're living in addition to everything else that had been going on. And as I sat down at my desk that morning to go about my normal sort of team meeting for our finance and ops team, was ready to do a regular day. And I remember saying to myself, this isn't a normal day. I'm gonna take a minute and talk about and create space to have a conversation, because that's the chair I sit in now. It's required. And so I think a lot of times it's understanding, it's with that intention and thinking about, how am I showing up? And also, how, in the way in which I show up, what does that mean for other people? And what does that mean for them, about giving them permission to show up as themselves? And what I heard from people on my team, one woman on my team who's a Black female, who said to me, she's 42 years old. I'm the first time she's ever had a boss who's Black. And she said to me, what I said that morning, which wasn't a planned speech, I just sort of spoke from my heart, because as I said, I decided at 8:59 that, gosh, I have to say something. And she's like, I was so impacted because I didn't know that I could show up this way. I was ready to put it behind me, and you showed me that I could show up as my true self. So, long way of answering your question, Annie, but I think that it's with a lot of intention. And it helps to be in a place where you feel safe doing it. So
I love that. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. And it's kind of sad that it took her this long to feel like she could show up and be herself. So There's a lot of work that needs to be done in the industry. The next question we have from Morgan, and she couldn't input it in Slido, so she's going to say it out loud. Morgan, are you on the call still?
Yeah, I am. Hi. Liz, it's so great having you here. Thank you so much for being here. Tom Staggs came and spoke to us a couple of weeks ago, actually, and talked obviously a lot about Hello Sunshine and that deal. And one of the key differentiators, he said, was that Hello Sunshine really valued diversity, and they wanted to be able to acquire a company that had women voices be really prominent in the stories. My question for you is whether you foresee there being pushback, or do you fear there being pushback and seeing the pendulum swing the other way in response to sort of the uptick in representation in Hollywood?
Of course, there will be. There's always, like, I think with anything where you see when people are successful, we as a society want to tear successful people down. We are a society of diverse viewpoints, some that like I agree with, some that I like disagree with, and so, yeah, I foresee there being pushback. And it's why, like I was saying before, is it's on each of us to be vigilant and to never take for granted that just because there's improvement now, that it may not change. And it can as easily go the other direction. And sometimes, again, on the positive side, I do think that objectively, as we think about the whys for diversity, I always go back to, like, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also like good business decision, So I think, look, my hope is that we really continue to make strides, but of course, I do think that there's always that sort of risk.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we have another question. So when working with execs who don't value diversity, what resources or skills have been helpful for you to successfully accomplish your diverse and creative objectives?
That's a really interesting question. I kind of go back to, with anything, it's a bit of knowing your audience and how do you sort of reframe and influence. I've definitely had conversations before about, like, we don't need to make this kind of content. What's the business? I go back to, again, because that's a lot of times the lens that people are looking at me to opine on. Like, what's the business case for making this kind of content, right? Because I have people tell me, well, look, these types of movies don't work. Well, actually, no, they do. This is what needs to be true. These are the ones that don't work, but this is how it can be, like, economically, like, viable. So it's like, it's finding what is the thing that's going to make a difference for that individual. What's the through which they see the world potentially, and what is it that they trust you and your viewpoint on, and thinking about it that way has been helpful to me. Haven't always been successful, to be clear, but I've tried, Yeah.
Yeah, so we have one more question. Okay. So given the importance of advocacy, how do you advise students to find official/unofficial mentors as an advocate in the industry?
I think there are two things. I think one, I'm like, don't be shy about asking someone. But I think that when you ask, it's like, a lot of times I'm like, be clear about what you're asking for. And mentorship can mean, like, and advocacy can mean a lot of different things. One of the things we talked about, it's like identifying, because we had a whole kind of committee sort of thing that, when anybody can volunteer, talk about mentorship and advocacy at Hello Sunshine. Like, what could we be doing more of? We talked about these mentorship moments, right? And mentorship isn't always like, hey, we talk once a month, we sit down for an hour, we have coffee, we talk about your career and what you want. It can be that, but can also be a, hey, can you explain to me, like we said the other day about XYZ deal, like announced, like, why do we structure it that way? Sure, let me talk you through it. That's a moment of, like, mentorship and a moment of advocacy. So I think it's create connections. Two, when you show up, be specific about what it is that you need and how a person can help. So I will tell you, most people like to feel like they're helpful, right? You know what I mean? And I think it's knowing your audience. It's like, if someone came to me and said, hey, can I have an hour once a week to talk to you? I'd be like, I wish I could. I don't have time. If someone said, hey, can I get an hour of your time or half hour of your time to talk about this specific thing? Oh, 100%. I'll do it. You know what I mean? So just don't be shy, but be, like, intentional and specific. Do your work ahead of time. So they're not like, well, why are you asking me about that? I don't know, Yeah.
Yes, that makes sense. So we have another question. Jasmine, do you want to state your question out loud or do you want me to say it for you? Jasmine Gibson.
Oh, hi, Ashley. Thank you for the opportunity. I will state my question out loud. Liz, we want to work with you. So how can we prepare to be effective in organizations like yours?
Oh, that's a great question. Look, one of the things I would do is say, and by the way, we are hiring, I don't think it's been posted yet. Sarah Harden, our CEO, and I need to hire a chief of staff to start. It starts in January, probably. But keep your eyes out for that job description. So look, I think one of the big things that I would say is get great internships. You are very lucky to be in Los Angeles. Build your network. Figure out who works at Hello Sunshine. Who are people that I know that may know someone who works at Hello Sunshine? Reach out, get in front of people to some degree. But again, remember, when you get in front of people, be specific about what it is that you want to know. Be prepared, do your homework, get to know people inside of the companies that you want to work for. And LinkedIn didn't exist when I was in business school, y'all. You'll have it. You can find your way to most people. Do it. Like, tap into that network. Look at courses I did. I think it was an MBA class that Suzanne Daniels and Molly Kinberg taught last year. It's me and a few other executives. I noticed actually on those things I participated in, what are the questions that ask great questions, impress people. I have literally, from panels that I've been on and people who've come up to me or were seated at a table where I was at, I afterwards will send my HR person a note and say, like, I'll tell certain people, please ping me. And I'll say, like, talk to these people because they're excellent. I want to keep an eye on them. So it's like every moment matters, and avail yourselves of those moments that you have while you're here. Be curious and learn, and like, just be a sponge. Because one of the things that I find in our industry is most important is building those networks of folks. It's a people-driven business and industry. So even more so incumbent upon you to build like that network, like with your peer group as well in entertainment, and maintain it, because they're going to go places and be people that you're going to need to call and, ask questions of, etc. But I don't know if that helped answer the question. But.
I think so. So we have another question. What have been the biggest challenges at Hello Sunshine and pushing for greater diversity within the company?
It's a really good question. I think that one of the things I'll say is, like, it's a hot market right now. It's a hot market generally for employment, like content's exploding, businesses, everybody's hiring because we all slowed down a little bit last year. There's a ton of growth. We've got huge pipelines of content that we've got to produce that we've all been developing during the pandemic when we couldn't produce stuff. So it's a great time for business. The challenging thing is also, like, so generally a hot employment market. Number two, everyone now sees the value. Right now, there's a real focus on like diversity. And so finding candidates who are like excellent, who have the right track record, and people of color, it's hard. I'll be honest. Like, it's a very challenging marketplace for folks. I think that, and I will tell you, I'm not necessarily going to win. I don't have Amazon stock or Apple stock to give out as currency when they come in. One of the things that we've been focused on is like making the opportunity that we have at Hello Sunshine is really unique. Like, the culture that we have is, I believe, like unlike any other in the industry. I think the type of opportunity that exists is really meaningful in terms of professional growth. So it's like we got some headwinds, which I talked about before, but I think we also have some tailwinds as well. And it's like kind of continuing to focus on those. And we're a very fast growing company. And we're about just under 70 people right now. We'll probably be 120 by the end of next year. And that doesn't include all the folks that, we bring on to work on individual productions that we're doing. So, it's hard to kind of, Hillary, who leads HR for us, is very busy doing a lot of recruiting. So
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And so we have another question from Ben. Ben, do you want to state your question out loud or do you want me to read it?
Oh, sure. I can state the question. Yeah, just thank you so much for being with us here, Liz. Really appreciate it. My question is more so, kind of being forward thinking about the, next wave of MBA students and prospective students on the call. I know that one kind of path I came to a crossroads, especially in business school, where you start to develop so many different skill sets, and you start to come to a place where you're like, okay, wait, I'm starting to develop skill sets that might be better suited in this area. And you start to realize, man, like, although I came in thinking this leave an impact, you start to see places where, okay, I think I could leave a greater impact there. So any advice that you would give maybe to those individuals like coming in or kind of maybe hitting that same crossroads where it's like, okay, I could do this, but I feel like I'd be now better suited to leave a bit greater impact here?
Yeah, I think that it is, I personally have always gone for, it's like, the impact plus the thing I'm most passionate about and most interested in, right? So even if I can make the most impact over here, but frankly, this piece interests me more. If you've got the capabilities and the skill set to do it, you may ultimately end up making more of an impact there. And it's like, again, kind of going back to those circles about like the capabilities, which I think is somewhat tied to like, is a big piece of impact, your interest. A company's needs, do what you want to do. Do the thing that you're passionate about doing, assuming that you have the capabilities and skill set really to be able to do it. Because I think a lot of times the impact will come. And then I think that if I speak to people too, when they're like, which job? I'm trying to choose between these two jobs or this company. I'm like, look at the person you're going to be working for. That is going to be the biggest determinant of your experience. Obviously, if a company doesn't have isn't financially solvent, it's still probably not great because you need the runway to be able to be there. But it's in the same reason that the reason people ultimately leave jobs most times is because of like, it's not the job, it's the person that they're working for. The person that you're working for in like on the other side of that coin, someone who's really focused on your growth is going to be, give you opportunities, all of those things can lead to a very positive experience in which you can make a ton of impact.
Solid. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this last question before we close out. And so we know that you have a very, demanding career. And how do you find time to balance that between your personal and your professional life? How do you set those boundaries for yourself?
Not so well. I mean, ask my wife, she'd say, she doesn't. No, I'm kidding. It's hard. It's like, I have to be intentional about it. Like, as I mentioned, I am now self-aware enough to know that I am predisposed to do certain things. I'm predisposed to say yes to stuff that I'm like, I probably should just say no because like there's a finite amount of time. So, we actually just had a baby, Ollie, who is almost 3.5 months old. That's actually finally helped me start setting boundaries. These are first. So like I've set some rules where like, one night a week, I'll go do something. I don't do breakfast anymore. I will make an exception. It will take it's a high bar to clear to make an exception to do that. I'll just do lunches because morning, if I'm doing dinners, I'm going to miss like bedtime. The morning is like the time that he's in the best mood, honestly. It's like my time with him. So it's just whatever it is, like finding a way to set boundaries. So yes, it took having a child for me to get better about doing that. But it's tough, but it's of the utmost importance because like I said before, find this article or I'll find it and actually make sure I get it to you about like the professional athletes and executives. But it's a long journey. It is a lot of work to get to whatever your ambition like is. And it doesn't get easier. Like it doesn't. It gets harder in a lot of ways. I have a job where I like literally, if I'm on vacation, I'm still not really on vacation because something goes wrong. Like I'm going to get a call, and so I have to make sure that I find ways to fill myself back up because if I don't, I'm not going to have the capacity to show up in the way that I need to show up. I tell a story one time of one day realizing I'd been at Hello Century for a year and a half and hadn't really taken any vacation. Even over the Christmas break one year, I'd spent it moving. And I started noticing myself, I'm like, I've been really like impatient and kind of bitchy to everybody this week. Like, what's going on with me? And I texted my boss, our CEO, one night and said, you know what? I need to put myself in timeout. We're going to go to Hawaii for a week. I know it's kind of crappy timing. I got a board meeting coming up in 3 weeks, but like, I need to go in timeout. She's like, we got it, go. Yes, you do. So I think it's like, don't let yourself get to that place. But really the awareness of like, you can't. You need capacity to be able to show up in a way and be effective. So it's like medicine that you gotta take to do it. So.
Yes, I agree. I'm learning that the hard way now.
Yeah, it's not a luxury, self-care. Yes. It's just like a basic human need.
Yes, and congratulations on the new baby.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So we are at time, and I just want to thank you again. I'm sure I can speak for everyone on the call that this has been a great session. You dropped some great gems. I was taking notes as you were speaking. Definitely something inspiring and motivating, hopefully, that'll lead the next generation of leaders on this call. And just want to thank you again for, sharing your time and your voice with us here today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been fun to see some of you all on screen. The thing I miss most about being on Zoom is you don't get to see everybody in a room, but thank you for the great questions. Ashley, moderator extraordinaire, really well done. I joke that it's the thing I hate doing. So I say yes, because I need to practice. But I'm sitting on a panel, fine, ask me questions, but being the moderator, I'm like, oh God, I have to listen and be thinking about what I'm going to say next. It's hard. So big shout out to you for doing it because you did it really well.
Thank you. It's all about challenging yourself, like you mentioned.
It is. Like I said, still to this day, I say yes to those challenges and stretches. So anyways.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you everyone else on the call.